Hello and welcome to my third C++ vector tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how you can use object-oriented programming to create an object of vectors, or a vector object. So what I've created here is I've just created a header file, another C++ file, and then my main C++ file where I have all my includes and using names standard, and my int main. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my header file. I'm just going to name this my header file. And then how you define classes is, well, we want to be using a class. So we want to define our class. So how you define a class in C++ is you say pound if not defined, and define it as users underscore h, and then you want to say pound define users underscore h, and then here you want to put end if. So this will allow us to create anything in here. So we can also do our includes here. So pound include iostream and pound include string. And then we can do our using namespace standard, and we can also put in here our class. So class users. And classes have to have curly braces and a semicolon after the curly braces. So this right here is our class. And so this is how you define a class. You say, if not defined as users, as whatever you named your header file in all caps, then you want to define it as users, and then you want to end if. This is basically an if statement, but for header files. And so now that we have our class created, we can start adding stuff to it. So there are two things in a class, or that we're going to be using at least. There are our public items and our private items. And these, I'm going to zoom in here, these are colons, not semicolons. So everything under our public here is going to be accessible to anything that has the include, but anything under our private is going to be accessible only to the things we gave a permission to. So we're going to put all of our member variables under our private. So I'm going to define this as our member variables. And then what our member variables are they are basically what we are going to be modifying in our program. So we're going to just be creating like a user program where you can enter their username, their password, and then how about an ID number or something like that. So that way I just have two different data types. So I'll say string new username, string new password, and then I'll also int new ID. Alright, so that's good for our member variables. The next thing we want to do under our public class is we create our functions. So all of our functions or modifiers or methods are going to be accessible to everything. So under our public, there are certain modifiers that we want to use. Well, the first thing you have to use is the default constructor. Don't know if I'm spelling that right. The default constructor. And what the default constructor is it's basically, if nothing is defined, we just want to set everything to null. Now in C++, by default, all strings are set to null. So the only thing that we are going to be setting is our integer. So we're going to be setting our integer to 0 using our default constructor, but we'll do that in a little bit. I might have to make this 2 videos if it goes too long. Anyways, so how we do that is we say users parentheses, and then we just stop it. Then we have our default constructor. Next thing we want to do is something called our overloaded constructor. And what our overloaded constructor is it's basically the same thing as our default constructor, except it passes in variables. And so that way we're going to be using our overloaded constructor to create new instances of our class. So what do we want in our overloaded constructor is we want to have the same things as our member variables. So we want to say we have a string new username, so we want to include a string data type, and we want to include another string data type for the password, and then we want to include an integer data type. And then we have our overloaded constructor. Now the last thing that we need are our that's hard to say, accessor functions. And what our accessor functions are going to do is they are going to be able to access the data that we pass into here. So usually in accessor functions you use the word get, so we're going to be doing that. So in our accessor functions, they're actually mostly variables. They're like string types and integer types and boolean types, so that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to say our string get username, and then it's a function, remember, so you had to have the parentheses, and then we are going to make that a constant because we don't want to change it, we just want to display it. So string get username, string get password, parentheses, constant, and then we want an integer get ID, parentheses, constant. Okay, so now we have all of our functions set up. We can define them or declare them. So I'm just going to say this function declarations. And the first thing we have to do is we have to include our users.h, and we don't need to include iostream or string, because what this will do, if we include this, it'll go in here and it'll read that they're already included. So we'll just include that users.h. And in users.h, we can just get right into it. So how do we define our functions that are in another class or file? We have to first call that name, so users. Then we have to use something called the scope. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but I'm just going to call it the scope because there's a longer name for it, so I'll just call it the scope. So then we want to use our scope, or our double colons, and this is how we can define our functions. So the first thing we're going to define, actually, hold on, I forgot a function. I forgot our deconstructor function. And what our deconstructor function will do is just basically get rid of it. So users. And then we have our deconstructor. We don't need to add anything to that. So anyways, once you add your deconstructor function here, we can start defining them. So we should probably define them in order. You don't have to, but it's good to. So the first thing we wanted to do is we want to call our users, then our scope, and then we'll just call users. And this is our default constructor. So we don't need to, so the only thing that we need to set, remember, because strings are set by default to, they're set by default to nothing. So we have to set just our integer to 0. So we want to say new ID is equal to 0. And it knows what new ID is because it is in our member variables. So now we have our default constructor set up. Next thing we want to do is our, what did I say next? Did I say our overloaded constructors next? So overloaded constructor. Yeah, this is going to have to be 2 videos. So this is our overloaded constructor, which is next. So how we define our overloaded constructor is we say users, and then users, and then we say string name, string pass, int ID. So this creates our hold on a second. Oops, I see my mistake. I accidentally said L instead of a comma there. So there we go. So this is the last thing we're going to be doing before the video ends. I'm just going to be setting our new username equal to whatever we pass into name, our new password equal to whatever we pass in for password, and then our new ID equal to whatever we pass in for ID. So yeah, that's all I can show for this video because I'm going to run out of time here. But yeah, once you get all this set up, I'll see you in the next video.